In last week's episode of the podcast, I explained that I haven't been able to work the way that I used to lately. And so I'm on a bit of a mission to find some ways for me to add back hours into the busy work week. In today's episode of the podcast, I'm going to be talking about this really cool tool that I've discovered that is helping me to do things faster. Make sure you stick around. In last week's episode of the podcast, I shared that I haven't been able to work at the same pace I once was. And as a result, I've been on a mission to figure out how I can make this business work for me as I step into the next phase and chapter of my life. So, as I shared in last week's episode, one of the techniques I'm using to save time is AI. You may have heard of ChatGPT. Well, in my opinion, this tool is even better. Want to find out more? Well, you'll have to listen on. Before I get started on this episode, if you do want to add time back into your busy working week, I have to tell you about my new free training coming up, which is 4 ways to use AI to supercharge your bank balance. This masterclass is a step-by-step training to walk you through how to use AI to grow your business profit without the tech overwhelm. In this 60-minute masterclass, you will learn how to confidently use the easy AI tool that brainstorms you hundreds of magnetic content ideas in just seconds. 3 sneaky systems that add hours back into your workday, all while growing your sales. We'll also be learning about the dangers of AI and things you need to avoid to protect your business and your brand. And lastly, you will learn how AI technology is changing the way you should manage your money to maximize your cash flow. I'm going to be delivering this training live, so please make sure you sign up for this training via the link in the show notes for today's episode. Alrighty, with no further ado, let's dive into today's episode of the podcast. And before I run a big teaser on this, I'm just going to dive straight on in and tell you exactly what the tool is that I am talking about. The tool is Google's Gemini, which is their equivalent of ChatGPT. So, what is Gemini? Although OpenAI and ChatGPT are the biggest and most well-known AI content generation tools, Google is really making waves in this space with Gemini. I've just been using the free version, which is called Pro, but there is also a paid option available. So what's the difference between Gemini and ChatGPT? Well, firstly, Google can read code, videos, and images. And I'm going to share a clip when I was researching for this episode that I found. It's a clip that was created by Google themselves. And they were asking the tool just to visually interpret images that they could see. So there was 2 images of 2 different cars on a slope. And they asked Google Gemini which car would go faster. In another clip, again, that I'm going to share in the show notes for the episode, they are walking around with the camera on the phone and they asked Gemini, said, hey, tell me when you can see something that makes sound. So they're walking around the room, the camera scrolled the room and then said, I can see a speaker, which makes sound. Like, how crazy cool is this technology? The uses of this are incredible when you think about it. Like you could take a picture of a computer program or a piece of equipment like a podcast microphone and say, how do I use this tool? My research from an article on tech.co, again, I'll link to that, has shown me the following differences between ChatGPT and Gemini. Again, this is one of the differences, the first one that I noticed myself, which is the real time access to the internet when using the Gemini tool. So when you use ChatGPT, it says these aren't live. It's not reading off the internet at the time, as compared to Gemini, which is a live reading off the internet. As I mentioned earlier, Gemini has image based responses, which is pretty cool. And it also has the capacity to read responses out loud. So if you are visually impaired, that is a really cool function. Or if you were driving or doing something else, again, that's a really cool feature to have. But ChatGPT definitely has its stronger points. One of the advantages of ChatGPT is its ability to learn from conversations and to hold context. So, being an AI tool, Gemini can absolutely do this, but at this stage, not to the same extent as ChatGPT. And let me explain what I mean by this. It's a learning tool, and with ChatGPT, it has a better capability to be learning from what you were telling it. So, for instance, if you are constantly in your question saying, hey, can you please provide me with a witty social media caption? Hey, can you please write me a witty blog post? Hey, can you please write me a witty podcast episode? ChatGPT is more inclined than Gemini to say, hey, this person is always asking me to write this in a witty tone of voice. And therefore, it is more inclined to naturally produce responses that are witty in the first place. I do believe that this will evolve over time because, of course, Gemini is AI, it is a learning tool. But at this point in time, the experts are saying that ChatGPT is better at that. So, why do I personally prefer Gemini over ChatGPT? Well, one of the things that I found when I first started using Gemini, it was just so easy to access and use. You literally type into Google Gemini, it pops up and you can start using it instantaneously. Whereas I found it a little bit clunky when I was downloading ChatGPT. And yeah, it just was harder to use. I also find Gemini more user friendly. The design is sleeker. ChatGPT to me looks a little bit antiquated with its visual aesthetic. As I mentioned earlier, ChatGPT is not online. It has taken a snapshot of internet data at a point in time, whereas with Gemini, it's live researching. So, for example, it will have the latest information. And being part of the Google suite, it is instantaneously trawling Google as well. And I know this sounds a little bit weird, but this is just my perception is that I think Gemini has a cooler personality than ChatGPT. And let me explain what I mean. It just feels younger and edgier with the responses that it's providing. And again, this is just my perception, but ChatGPT felt a little bit more formal. Yeah, that's what I was finding with some of the responses that are coming out. I know that sounds bizarre, and of course, being AI, the platforms will evolve and learn your tone of voice and your inclinations, but just at first uses, those were my perceptions. So let's dive into how I'm actually using Gemini to add time back into my work week. I am using this tool multiple times a day. It's become one of the tools that I simply cannot get through a successful workday without using. And here's some examples of how I might use it in a workday. I will say, hey, can you share 50 ideas for a witty reel about why it's very important to manage your business finances? I might say, can you give me 7 ideas of a podcast episode I can record about AI? And for me, thought leadership is very important. I don't just want to be spitting out things that a computer has generated for me. So I'm always adding my own thought leadership. But for me, I'm loving getting inspiration and ideas around how to create content. And the thing that I love is how quickly it gets created. Okay, if you're finding this tool really fascinating, or even the whole concept of AI fascinating, and you'd like to learn more, I'm sharing more about Gemini, including demonstrations live of how I use it inside my upcoming free masterclass. And I'm also going to be using some other live examples of how I'm using AI and how you can use AI, some of the tools that are available, and specifically how to actually use them. This masterclass is free and it's delivered live by me across two different time zones. So hopefully you are able to attend one of those sessions live. The masterclass is called 4 Ways to Use AI to Supercharge Your Bank Balance. And you can sign up via the link in the show notes for today's episode. AI is here to stay, and it is already transforming my business in big ways. And I can't wait to show you how it can do the same for you.